today one of the songs we're going to look at is High Voltage Anxiety, the first song from the new batch from Cry Club, the band I play in and that I also produce with.
That one released quite recently?
Yes, November of last year. We put out one more single since, which I might show you later, but this was the first one that was kind of like a bit of a reset for us in terms of like style and where we wanted to go this point on.
Awesome. How did you come about with the idea for this song?
This is actually the start of the idea. So I can see that on the 22nd of April, I can see on the file here, pretty much the whole idea, even the structure of it, it's just without second guitar, is pretty much... Even that bridge thing.
That's really cool. So that was the first demo?
Yeah, that's like day one at 11:26 in the morning. So that tells me that I got into the studio between like 9 and 10, and then like in an hour and a half, I got that.
Full idea.
And then I can see the next file is the next day in the evening. So the next day Heather and I would have had together. We ended up... And that sounds like it's just day one was the instrumental, pretty much all coming together. Day two was the vocals starting to go in. And day three is just a tidy up of the lyrics, it sounds like. And then I've got a bunch of different revisions from there that pretty much all lead into the additional layers coming through. You can't really hear it too much in that rough mix, but there's like this ghosty guitar stuff going on, which I can show you.
Sick. So your production process, you do all your production in-house?
Yeah, so we've... previous records, we've done like demos ourselves and then have gone to external producers. The first record was purely like, I'm going to have like one drum machine, one clean guitar track, one distorted guitar track, a bass, clean bass, a distorted bass, and then the vocals. And we have to figure out all the songs with that really limited palette. And then the next record was like, okay, let's open up a little bit more. Let's kind of push it as far as we can ourselves. And that was kind of like a big growing experience for us. And then this new record, I think, is kind of like, in terms of the sounds that we've got in these new songs, is very like kind of us at like, oh, we've actually hit the place we want to be in terms of just skill set and the kind of sounds that we want to be incorporating.
That's sick.
So a lot of it's done kind of in this home studio kind of environment. And then the typical path is that we'll work on a song as much as we can here. And then once we've got enough songs to go and record some live drums, we'll go do that. So this song has a lot of sampled drums in it, but we still do record some live stuff for it. And so there's some cymbals, but there's also some like this drum stuff here, like really slammed out fills, kind of stuff. And one of the drummers we had in had like a clap stack.
Oh, that's super cool.
So a stereo clap stack.
That's really cool.
What's better than one clap stack? Two. Panned left and right.
So your demoing process, you program the drums generally?
The reality is that it'll happen how it happens. A lot of the time it'll start with like, especially songs that are based on drum loops like this one is. This one has like this kind of running breakbeat throughout. So with something like that, that would be me essentially writing something to that breakbeat. And that ended up being what this song became. The intro initially was just like the loop running, and I was like, oh, I want it to like hype up. So I actually have...
Oh, that's...
the formant being like automated upwards. I'm super into, like, especially if you're doing stuff that's like mostly built out of samples, some kind of way of introducing something that makes it feel like you've broken it being just a loop. Like our ability to perceive something as kind of uninteresting because it's just a loop is pretty strong. So if you do anything to like kind of break it up, it can be really useful.
So in this process, you started with the demo and a lot of that made it to the final song?
Yeah. Honestly, we are at the stage now where we try and bring as much as we can from the demo into the final song. There's a bunch that I would be retracking, but like... So that's all from just the demo, and that would have been carried over. And then we have some like recorded drums over the top of that. Say that's like the same kick that I would have had at the start is now the same kick that's on the final record is what we're trying to aim at. That would have been from the demo that carried over. I know there are some guitars here that are labeled as demo guitars. Oh, this one's cool. Kind of like taking like the industrial techniques around copy pasting stuff. So doing like a take of the guitar and then actually just getting like eighth note punches of it kind of sounds like a fax machine almost.
Yeah. I really like the way you blend sort of like live instrumentation with like the digital sound. Like,
yeah. And I think that's a thing that like a lot of people over, you know, the last like 10 years, I'd say even have been really trying to nail. Like you see it even in like big pop bands like the 1975, where it's like the ability to blend digital and analog things. And how you get those two things to meet is a challenge that everyone's kind of been trying to get their own solutions towards. I'm a big believer in having a lot of like untouched elements in a song, where it's like something that might be a bit loose or wonky versus things that are really hard gridded. I think is like a really fun balance for the human ear to get. But that being said, like getting that right is tricky.
Yeah, especially nowadays, a lot of like all the big records, everything's like completely gridded, but some of that loose feel can add some humanness to the song.
But even then, like I think, say, in terms of big records, like Please, Please, Please by Sabrina Carpenter, it sounds incredibly polished, but it's not very gridded. Because Jack Antonoff was previously the grid man, and now he's like trying to go anti-grid. Maybe one of the reasons why that song is connected so much is because it's standing out as something that's not a gridded country song. It's got a looseness to it, this like ABBA 70s thing about it.
It's like imperfectly perfect in a way, yeah.
Yeah, which I think is like the constant struggle with these things of like, someone was talking about the idea of like, if you're on the highway of recording a song, perfect is a turn off that's always after cool.
I like that.
Cool
yeah.
is always before perfect, and like trying to always keep that in mind when you're working on stuff, to go like, yeah, you can work on this thing kind of infinitely and make it perfect, but there actually reaches a threshold where it stops being as cool and it starts actually being less interesting because of that.
With your process, obviously you work quite quickly with making that demo in about an hour.
Yeah.
And your singer, they write pretty quickly, or what's that process like?
With vocals, we typically write that together from the angle of like, essentially we always want to be convinced of the idea. And sometimes that means that if one of us goes away and works on something for a really long time and we bring it to the other person, if they aren't convinced, then it's just not going to go anywhere. Whereas we're always at our best when we're both in the room together.
Yeah.
I can't remember fully how this song came about. There's a version of this where Heather might have been in the room with me when I was doing the instrumental. I genuinely can't remember. It's an interesting one where, like, especially when it comes to vocals, we both have to be so convinced on that part because we're so picky about it. It does take us a long time, and it honestly, like, lyrics end up being a really big time sink for us, because we'll come up with a melody quickly and then spend hours being like in rhyme zone, being like, come on, come on, and we end up getting there. I think some people are really fast on that stuff and other people aren't, and we just aren't, unfortunately.
You like to take your time with that.
Yeah.
Do you find it hard to determine when something is done? Like, when do you decide that your idea is finished?
The thing for me often is the point at which I think I have pushed it as far as it can possibly go. I've been kind of like, one of the things that's been like a recurring pattern for me for the last couple of years has just been discovering how much further ideas can actually go. When you're working on a song by yourself, you're often thinking to yourself like, oh yeah, I've done everything I can with this. I wouldn't change a thing. And then you send it to someone, or you get an opinion from someone where they go like, what happens if you went further? And you're like, I am at the bottom of the well. And then you just try and push it further. And then you discover the things that end up being your favorite things about the song by just trying to push further. But then in that, it's like, where do you draw the line? And I think at the moment where you draw the line is almost the point where you're like, you couldn't possibly push it any. Like, you actually hit like putting another layer on will kill the idea or something. And then you can go through and go like, what layers can you actually just straight up mute and not change the song? If you can mute a layer and it doesn't change how the song feels, I'm sorry, but that layer wasn't important.
I like that.
Or, you know, like, or maybe instead of all three of your choruses being the exact same batch of tracks, it could be a thing of like, your first chorus doesn't have the synth counter melody. and then you save it for your second one, so it's actually noticeable when your second chorus rocks up, or things along that line. But also, like, genre can be a big leading thing. Not that following the rules of genre and style is something you need to adhere to, but it can really give you a good guide on, like, okay, what's the target here? The target for us with this song is to kind of just make people freak out. And the moment where we'd go like, oh yeah, that's we're doing what we can there, then that's like a really good mark for us.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I see you have a bit of analog gear in the studio. What's your approach with analog versus digital, for example? Do you use a lot of analog gear in your production, or do you prefer to focus on digital stuff?
I think for me, I would focus primarily on digital purely because of the practicality of things, like especially when it comes to making really extreme sounds. As an example, in most of the songs now, there are just tracks called noise 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I can't do that with, like...
Yeah, that's only
outboard,
digital, yeah.
You know? That one's got some fucking heft to it. And that sounds like just nonsense, but when you put the drums to it...
Oh, yeah.
And even over here, there's this synth lead. And like, these are some sounds that I could be making kind of out of the box with like a delay or a reverb or things like that. And I do record in with a lot of that sort of stuff sometimes. It's kind of about like the quickest path to the idea. If the quickest possible path to the idea is me going like beep, beep, bop, and I plug a few things in, then I'll do that. But if the quickest path is me opening up a soft synth and putting some plugins that I know will do a sound that I want, then I'm just going to do that. And it's just half the game with this is about speed. As you saw, like the initial demo took like an hour and a half. The idea in that is just get it done quickly. Especially when you're capturing an idea, it's all about speed.
Yeah.
Just so you can stay as inspired as possible. And then when it comes to like refining it and making it sound exactly the way you want, then it's take the time you need. How often am I plugging in this echo and reverb? Not a ton, especially if I'm like coming up with an idea. I'm more likely to plug it in when I'm having fun with something and I'm less focused on trying to capture something quickly.
Yeah.
Or like this very fancy reverb here. It's really easy for me to just plug guitar into it. I'm often using that for my guitar reverbs purely because I mean, it's just there,
Yeah.
You know, like sometimes something just being there is like how these things end up connecting. Yeah, if I know this has a thing I want, plug in a few things, and then suddenly I have the sound that I've been looking for. And that ends up being the fastest path. Whereas previously, before having that, I knew that if I wanted that sound, then I would go into this plugin, put it on this setting, and I'd get there. But it now ends up being quicker to just plug the pedal in to get it. I think a pattern that a lot of people get in is they go like, oh, I really want to get this new gear because it'll help me get all these new sounds, and I want to buy XYZ synthesizer. That's awesome, but you actually might be better off learning the synthesizer that you already have to another level and squeezing as much as you can out of it. Like, I always think about the like NERD kind of production style, like the Pharrell Williams kind of world, where it's like so much of that was like a Korg Triton synth.
Yeah.
You go through each of the patches and you go like, that's a number one hit, that's a number one hit. It's because they really squeezed that for all it was worth, you know?
Yeah.
And like, especially with the stuff that we have now, it's like, if you've got like the Arturia pack, you've got practically infinity in front of you.
Yeah.
Like, so for me, I used to have a lot more outboard stuff like compressors and things like that, and I just didn't find it to be anywhere near as useful for me for the kind of stuff that I do. I will say that like now I'm on the Apollo life means that I do get like a preamp and compression on the way in. I get guitar amps on the way in, stuff like that, and it's a lot easier. I kind of do have the best of both worlds in that regard, which is why I'm a huge advocate for the Apollo experience for producers specifically.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an interesting one where if you're trying to make something really good and perfect, that's a different process. But if you're just trying to capture a vibe of a song, that's almost has a completely different set of goals and targets about it.
Yeah. I love that mentality. Obviously, you're a band that does perform live as well.
Yes.
Obviously, your process has a lot of digital elements. How does that translate into a live experience?
I'll see if I can open up this Ableton session. How I do it live. This is my masterwork / nightmare of an Ableton session. that runs it. I actually watched, there was the documentary about Lollapalooza. They mentioned Nine Inch Nails was on the first one, and it was like pretty Hate Machine era. So like just as they were becoming a bigger band. And at that point, they were running track because they had all this industrial stuff from the studio, but they were running it on a 4-track tape machine because that's the equipment they had at the time. It was left in the sun, and the tape started to fuck up and all this sort of shit. So they actually couldn't get through the set. And I was like, oh my God, playback problems even back in the 90s, you know? Yeah. For us, like I had a laptop rig and all that sort of stuff that we used for the first handful of years with Cry Club. But then we played a festival and I plugged it in and smoke came out. It actually straight up blew up at a festival, and I had to like scramble to do a solution in the moment. We only got to play a handful of songs, unfortunately. But figured out a solution. We got through it. But since we've been on a rock solid thing, which is a Cymatic LP16, which is a playback device. They don't sell them anymore, unfortunately. But it's 16 outs on the back, MIDI in and out. And I've got it programmed now, so that playback device actually does my pedal changes for me. But I have everything kind of built in this Ableton session. Here's High Voltage Anxiety.
Oh, awesome.
I've got markers up the top. I've got a clip that's like adjusting the tempo of everything to be the right thing. A couple of layers of click, because people want different kinds of click. A cue, a few different things. But essentially, out of the Pro Tools session, I will often ask for the mixed Pro Tools session, and I can go into that and export the mixed version of files.
So it sounds accurate live, yep.
Yeah, and then I'll bring them into my Pro Tools session here, give them a balance or do any compression that I might need to do, or like even just like level setting between songs to try and maintain some kind of like the bass guitar will be at this level kind of thing. I'll do my best in that regard and then kind of use these buses to export them. And then those will go into my device. That's my playback. But essentially the big wraparound for all of this stuff has been like a lot of learning to go like, okay, from the idea in Pro Tools to recording it and then playing it live. Playing it live often ends up being the final step in making the song. Like there's a version where we'll actually get to the point where the song is completely mixed and mastered before we even entertain playing it live.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of bands now end up in that position, and it means that there's like a lot of work at that stage of making it live. So in that is just kind of deciding like, okay, say in this Pro Tools session of like these programmed drums, we have to decide in amongst all of that, like what is our drummer who's going to be performing with us live going to play, and what are they not going to play? So let's get rid of the kick, let's get rid of the snare. That's that offbeat hat, let's keep that. There's like this crash wash we could probably... Let's keep the riser and let's keep the break. Let's get rid of the wash. And then keep that break beat. So then we can go through and like see what it feels like in a rehearsal room to go like, okay, what if you play the kick snare crash part and just see how that settles in? Okay, if that doesn't. And then like an understanding that the levels will constantly change. There was someone we worked with one time as a front of house person. He was the front of house person for Rufus, like Rufus du Sol, like big electronic band. And then he was saying like, oh yeah, there was like, you know, where they were at the Red Rock Amphitheater and during soundcheck, they were still changing the levels in their Ableton session.
Interesting.
You know? Like it's just a process of constantly refining it. And when you're going through it, it feels like, God, this just never ends, that you're constantly going to adjust these levels, but it's just part of the process. But just going like, cool, there's my additional drums, and then getting like your bass. And then there's the question of like, do you split your bass up between like, is it bass guitar or is it everything that's bass?
Yeah.
And all these sort of things to navigate and going like, what guitar am I actually going to play live? What am I not going to play? Remiss to not point out this synth bass, which is one of my favorite sounds we get.
Oh yeah.
And that's just so fun live. This cut guitar, I mean, there's just... I can't do that live.
Yeah.
So it's just figuring out like what are the most important things for us to be performing live, because I think a lot of people who end up playing to track, the issue can often be when, let's say, there's a big melody feature in the song and no one on stage is playing it.
Yeah.
That doesn't feel super awesome, I don't think. And makes sense sometimes why it happens. But I think it's almost a thing of figuring out, like, what are the most important parts of the song that are happening, making sure those are being performed live, and then kind of, like, moving in and around them to the best of your ability.
Yeah. You want to maintain the sound of the song, but also add some liveness to it, I guess. Yeah.
Totally. Well, I just think a lot about, like, let's say if you're in the audience, you're watching a song happen that you know. Let's say there's the part that you would, like, sing along to or something.
Yeah.
If someone's not doing that on stage, it can get kind of weird. There are times where it makes sense if it's, like, a really specific thing that could never be played live.
For sure.
It's an interesting needle to thread. A lot of the discussion around, like, track being a positive or a negative thing, I think we're kind of past the point of, like, people being, oh, track is always bad. But also, like, navigating the way to do it in an aesthetically pleasing way. I think the top dogs know how to do it in a way that feels awesome. But I think everyone kind of underneath, we all have to figure it out in our own ways. And I think that's like an interesting thing that becomes part of everyone's processes. Only in the final guitar recording did we land on adding these chuggy guitars in the second pre-chorus. And that ended up being, like, the big feature in the song that it got to this particular point. But I've got, like, a video recording of me turning around to Heather being like, what if I did this? And it's this. When you put everything behind it.
Oh, yeah.
It ended up being, like, the glue that brought it all together was, like, a bit more of a metal approach, which ended up being a really fun thing. I've got, like, what we call, like, the ghost guitar.
Yeah.
It was, like, this, like, plate reverb heavy kind of thing. There was, like, the noise track. So, yeah, this is the loop. Where it came from, who knows?
Who knows?
And then my good friend Digitalis got involved.
Oh, I've not seen this.
Yeah, this thing's crazy. I actually bought some, like, extra packs for it. And the preset Annihilator
That's really cool. I'm
really
gonna have to
lives
check that
up
out.
to the name. And then, like, some EQ to... Here we go.
Oh.
How's that for an EQ curve?
Yeah.
We also have these big, like, gang vocals that we recorded.
So are those gang vocals actually multiple people or just layered of the one person?
We got like 10, 12 people together.
Oh, that's sick.
But one of the things that ends up being actually a bit of a problem with doing gang vocals is the actual amount of headphone spill in the room.
Oh, yeah.
Because everyone's got these headphones and they're all cranked and people are taking them off their ears, so there's tons of spill. So you actually have to need to go in there and fade them pretty heavy. And to actually get the feeling of a room, you have to send them to a reverb pretty heavily. Because otherwise you're just going to get tons of spill. And sometimes it's fine to have that, but other times you really need it to be precise. And because the amount of noise already in this particular song, these are like crimped and cut to be exactly where they need to be, and they are out of wherever they don't need to be. And also, I just do have to shout this one particular plugin out because it is the lifesaver in doing this kind of like really fast stuff. Say with this cut guitar here. That's where it starts, right?
Yeah.
Is like really just aggressively cut. There's no fading. There's no nothing.
Yeah, you can hear some pops and...
And then it's all gone. And it's just the RX mouth D-click. And I use this on everything. I will put this on drum overheads. I will put this on bass guitar. I'll put it on anything. It does introduce a bunch of delay, but from RX 9 onwards, it was actually an amount of delay that still lived within the delay compensation of Pro Tools. Previous versions introduced an amount of delay that would completely break your playback. Whereas from RX 9, it just was cool with it. So any time that I'm doing any like nasty editing that's deliberately to break it, I can still have it work sonically purely because I can just go through and mouth D-click the guitar and watch every single edit is being repaired in real time.
That's really cool. That's some sauce.
So especially if I'm distorting things that much, having them, like if I took that off, like It's not bad, and it doesn't change it too much.
It's a bit cleaner, I reckon.
But obviously doing it on vocals.
Yeah.
Like you can see here, even just playing the session around a little bit, there's over been 1,000 clicks repaired.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the classic one is... You can hear the clicks that it takes out just to prove that it's actually doing something. But yeah, something like that is so useful. So especially doing something extreme but keeping it clean with something like D-click is just a really useful tool.
What's the average sort of track count you have in a session?
I would love to be able to give you like, oh, it's going to be this number here.
Yeah.
I've been recording since 2011 with Pro Tools. Like, it's been a long time. There's only ever been one session that I hit an amount of tracks that I received from someone that I actually couldn't open in the version of Pro Tools I had at the time.
Yeah.
It was an engineer and producer who I learned a shit ton from, this guy Lachlan Mitchell. He did a lot of recordings with really awesome bands, but he would always, like, whenever I was assisting for him, and he was like, cool, we're going to record guitars today. I want these amps and I want these mics in front of them. It would be like 4 amps with 2 microphones each and a set of room mics. So 8 tracks of amps, a stereo for the room, and a DI track. So that means 11 individual tracks per take of guitar. So the second you hit like a chorus and have like 4 guitar parts playing, you have 44 individual tracks of that single take. It gets pretty extreme. And I do love recording like that when the time calls for it. But in a song like this one, for instance, it's a lot more direct in the sense of like, I'll have a DI and then an amp. And I'll do the DI so I can do any like reampy, but I'll usually record the amp out of the Apollo. I'm usually recording with my aux 1 will often be my like guitar amps, and I've got them in escalating levels of overdrive.
Oh, that's a good way to do it.
Have it laid out. So here's the Friedman setup as a clean channel. Here's it set up as like crunchy channel. And then here's the 100 set up as like a distortion channel. So I'm able to record in with that, which is really helpful. And doing it in on as an aux track means that I get to keep my DI line that I'm using as track 1. So that way in Pro Tools, I'm recording the DI and the amp simultaneously.
That's really cool, actually.
That's one of the big advantages of the Apollo. But then even then, if I'm doing any, let's say I turn on this like plate reverb, which I use a lot, and then put it into the amp, suddenly then that's going to be a stereo signal. So then some of my tracks here, that's actually a stereo.
Yep.
And then it's getting wigged out. So just keeping track of what's stereo and what's not. But just in terms of like overall track count, this one feels a bit more traditional in the sense of like it's not going nuts in terms of number of tracks.
Yeah.
If anything, it's like probably on the bottom end purely because of the like it's got a lead vocal and a couple of backing vocals, but not that many. So I would consider this a pretty direct number of tracks.
Are there any production techniques or plugins you recommend for producers to look into?
The thing about plugins is if they inspire you to make something cool, then hell yeah.
Yep.
This is the compressor I use 90% of the time.
Yep.
CLA 76. It does what it's supposed to do. Pro Q3 does what it's supposed to do. I do like Transient Master on drums. You can see here I haven't really done anything with this particular session, but if I'm doing a drum focus session, I'm going to be using this a lot just to dial that in.
Awesome.
L2, really? Is it awesome? No. Does it keep your shit in place? Yes. Like, the classic one is toms can be really dynamic.
Yeah.
To the point where you'll completely lose the soft ones, and then the loud ones will just kill you.
Yeah.
So having something that can actually, like, put a ceiling on how loud your toms can go is a really important thing. I am a diehard Devil Lock supporter. I have it actually set to the preset I like. 1 on Crush, 1 on Crunch, Zero Darkness on Fast, and then mix at 1. If I put on drums, if I just put this on it, yeah, I would likely feel pretty cool about it. Or putting that on vocals, for instance. Even just in terms of plugins, I've pointed out, like, here's a standard Waves one. Here's some Fab Filter stuff that everyone should get.
Yeah.
This is the Sound Toys thing. So I'm kind of like using a lot of different packs that I've built and bought over the years. But you can see I'm not using a ton of really crazy stuff. I'm a very big fan of Aberrant DSP. This is the Lair Reverb that I think is amazing, that I use on a lot of stuff. But as I showed you before on those noise tracks, this is the Aberrant DSP's Digitalis.
Sounds like R2-D2 or something.
Right? It just makes crazy sounds, and sometimes you just need something crazy. a lot of the stuff we've been working on has been just essentially crushed into the dirt by something like Digitalis, just to go like, oh, that sounds crazy.
What's an average vocal chain look like for one of your songs?
You can see in the session there's not a ton going on, but then when it comes to the vocals, there's a bit more processing. So just sending you through this vocal chain. It's mouth declick, some de-essing. Everyone goes like, oh, de-essing at the front? I'm like, yeah, de-essing everywhere. A bit of gate, just to get some of the room out. Devil lock, because we love it. You just love to see it. The CLA, because I'm recording in with an 1176 and a 2A on the way in. So just like the classic one is, you want to be way more compressed than you think you do. More de-essing and more mouth declicking. So at the top and the bottom, I'm mouth declicking and de-essing, just because of how extreme that stuff gets. And then just some master bus stuff. Classic one is Pro L2. Whoever said gain plus 9, they were right. I don't know who decided that, but they were right.
Thank you for the interview. Where can we check out Cry Club?
We're online everywhere as Cry Club. If you just look us up, you'll find us. Not sure when you're going to see this, but we will be going on tour in June, playing around the country. So if you want to come see us play, see this song live, go get yourself a ticket.
Awesome. This song's out on all platforms?
It's out everywhere. We got another one out called For Your Health that we're very excited about. So
thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And check out Cry Club everywhere.